Let me put in the record. Okay.
Welcome everybody to this series on Tao Te Ching or Tao Te Ching. We're doing it in that order this time. So we are on number 46. So please go ahead and type an exclamation mark to read your favorite translation. And then we will have Jason and Amon present theirs. Kwan, go ahead.
Okay, so it's the translation by Professor Moss Roberts, stanza 46. When the way prevails below the sky, disbanded chargers dun the land. But when the way the world desert, war horses breed outside the towns. No crime exceeds desire sanction. No war is worse than discontent. No omen more dire than desire gained. Truly with few ones content, contentment lasts as long as life.
Thank you, Kwan. Folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark to read 46. Next up is going to be Penny. Penny, go ahead.
Okay, this is J.H. MacDonald. When the world follows the Tao, horses run free to fertilize the fields. When the world does not follow the Tao, war horses are bred outside the cities. There is no greater transgression than condoning people's selfish desires, no greater disaster than being discontent, and no greater retribution than for greed. Whoever knows contentment will be at peace forever.
Peace.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Connie. Connie, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Ursula Le Guin. Wanting less. When the world's on the way, they use horses to haul manure. When the world gets off the way, they breed war horses on the common. The greatest evil, wanting more. The worst luck, discontent. Greed's the cure of life. Curse of life. To know enough's enough is enough to know.
Thank you, Connie. Anybody else wants to read? Go ahead. Otherwise, Peiji, would you read your translation, please? Just reading of the translation. Peiji, you need to unmute.
Sorry. In a world that follows Tao, horses are led to walk, leaving droppings in farmlands. In a world that does not follow Tao, pregnant mares are sent to walk abroad, giving birth on battlefields. No great misfortune than not knowing contentment. No guilt surpass the desire for more. Indeed, those who know contentment will always have enough.
Thank you. Thank you, Peiji. Next up is Amon and Jason. Go ahead, folks.
Jason, I'll let you share and I'll read from my copy.
Okay, let me see. Okay, yes. So you can see it?
Yep. Just a second. There we go. Chapter 46, Knowing Contentment. When the world was governed with Tao, fast horses worked the soil. When the world was governed without Tao, war horses were born on the battlefield. No disaster is greater than not knowing contentment. No mistake is greater than willing to gain. Therefore, the contentment of knowing contentment is always the contentment.
Yeah, thank you, Amon. I think here we probably see two different kind of translation. In general, I think the word is this word, the Chinese word called fen, and the means and some translation called dung or manure. Okay, So another way to translate, which I take, is take this word, it means dung or manure, but also means fertilizer. Okay, so that means working, fertilizing the land. So basics doing the agriculture. So that means when the world was governed with Tao, fast horse, 走马, the walking horse, the horse use work on the soil because there's no war. They work on the soil doing the agriculture. When the world was governed without Tao, war horse were born on the battlefield. So basically talking about the even the pregnant male has to being sent to the battlefield. So, and then the rest would be most are the same. No desire is greater than not knowing contentment. No mistake is greater than willing to get. So I think that's easy. And another thing I like to point out is the last sentence, the contentment of knowing contentment is always the contentment. So I try to capture the Chinese word. There's the three word called 足, 知足, 知足, 常足. Okay, so I try to make sure we use three contentment in the sentence to capture the tone. And the one thing is I put the printers here. I start to notice the Ma Wang Dui, which is the new discovered Tao Te Ching, which also the one we use start with De. In One Piece version, I think only have the word 长, doesn't use the word 横. And the second word is being used in the new version or Ma Wang Dui version. And I like to translate this word as always, and the other word 常 as common, usual, typical, this kind of meaning. Okay, so kind of like, because in the One Piece version, they only have one word, but the new version has two words. So I kind of experimenting, try to separate this word with a different meaning. So we will see how does it work. And of course, it's very welcome. Anybody have any suggestion or how do you feel? And we will be very happy to know. Yeah, thank you. And Amang, you have something to say?
I wanted to say thank you again for everybody being here and for this chance. I also want to draw attention to something that was pointed out before, which is it's never a bad idea to refresh what did you just read in 45 and what will this be speaking to next. 45 talks about great accomplishment not seeming great, the defilement of expectations. And here you have, when the world is governed with Tao, horses that would be raced or war horses or things of admiration, they just work the field. That's what they do. It's unremarkable what they do. But that is a great accomplishment because the world is contented enough for something like this to occur. So again, what is the message? Not just that knowing enough or knowing contentment is what is most important. How do you know contentment? You can be contented to know that what is occurring around you is actually remarkable and actually valuable accomplishments. Things as simple as, you know, the droppings of horse dung in the field. That's fertilizing. That'll be food in a couple of, you know, seasons time. So this is, once again, pay attention to the unremarkable, pay attention to the neglected, because in paying attention to that, you discover what is more valuable, more worth your admiration, and you can be contented with very, very little.
Thank you. Thank you, Amon. All right, folks. I would love to hear your comments. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. First up is going to be Peter.
I'm gonna have difficulty with this one, but I'll try my best. To me, I think there's great significance in this idea of the horses of the spirit or soul, let's say, the compulsions of movement, in relationship towards that which of the horse metaphor of that which guides, that putting the horses after the cart. Sorry, I'm mixing things up, but this idea of what does it mean to our shit in relationship towards that sort of being the mud to the lotus. And I think it's so easy in gosh, I can't help the idea of the Jungian shadow, this idea of the self that we repress, that we deem as shit, so that we can put gold on top of it, trying to cultivate gold on top of the vulnerability, the parts of that we normally reject and deem as ugly in vulnerability, because whatever that is for the individual, it is that attempting to endlessly to fight oneself, to fight reality, because we want to reject the fundamental thoughts, feelings, and relationships that are underneath, and so split our soul in two to be endlessly at war within ourselves and outside, because we do not know how to value. That's as Amon said, the ordinary, the underappreciated, but also that which is rejected. And to me, it is that building the self upon the rejected parts as a form of chronic resistance, chronic tension, that people build entire personalities on, entire lives on, that deep strength of resistance that needs sort of be addressed, so that the manure can act as the fertilizer, so long as it's attempting to get rid of or to be stored away from the supposed pristine, then there will not be the cultivation of your fields, and so you will look elsewhere for the sustenance of the self.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Next up is going to be Kwan.
Yes, I also have a little bit difficulty with this one, because and the way that I can, let's say, let the deep lesson of this one enter in me is once again with the help of the hexagram, because I think that this one um, has to be understood within the dialectical framework of the hexagram of heaven and earth and of man. Because maybe I'm offering an intellectual and not deep enough interpretation, but if we take the words like that, without the greater framework of the understanding as given by the hexagram, it could lead to a kind of complacency and to a kind of laziness. And because after all, it is quite easy to be contented for most human beings, I think. Maybe I'm a little bit obsessed with the civilizational perspective because I'm a reader of history. Many people on Earth in the last 5,000 years would be very easily described by this stanza. And the result, well, they disappear from Earth because they were too contented for having developed complex society, for having failed to develop nations and empires, for having failed to develop science and technology. So to be contented, certainly, but I would say within the framework of the hexagram, meaning that deep contentment coming from pure awareness, we have to discover that source of pure awareness, which is our true being. But at the same time, we are also being in flesh in space-time. And being in space-time, you need to also answer to not the basic needs, okay, but also the flourishing, the glory of what can be done in space-time. And once again, I wouldn't use the images of the state development rather than to stay at the level of the tribes. You have to strive to go to the state of nation, to go to the state of empire. It doesn't mean that you don't root yourself in that pure awareness, so not to fall into the mistakes or to the hubris precisely of the animal kingdom when that pure awareness is absent. I want to stop here because I don't want to make a long speech on that, because I could have made a long speech. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwan. Great point. Next up is going to be Jason, followed by Madeline and Shrikant. Jason.
Yeah, I'd like to point out here the title is Knowing Contentment, and the contentment has been used many times in these short verses. And at the beginning, also talking about the world, and the Chinese word is under the heaven, as I always understand under the heaven is talking about political, and talking about war horse, okay? So I believe this one is talking to the ruler, the prince, about the warring during that time, and try to teach or give the warning to the ruler about knowing the contentment. Okay, so of course we can take this lesson as a moral lesson to for our personal behavior, but I believe the original purpose is teach the ruler about the contentment, so you can avoid war and the war horse can walk in the field, not the battlefield. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Next up is going to be Madeline, Shrikant, and Penny. Madeline.
Yes, thanks, Shrikant and Jason and Aman. When I look at this, I mean, there is a wrongness to giving birth on the battlefield, whether you're a horse or a human being. And since I'm not very war or politically oriented, I also look at this on a more metaphysical level. To say that that it's talking about exporting the generative part of yourself, the part that contains that innocent child that's discussed in some other verses, is exporting that to the external world, and keeping it out there is not the thing to do if you want to be content. If you want to be content and live a good life, etc., the place for that kind of generative energy is to stay inside your own city gates, to keep it internally, rather than keeping it out there in the world all the time. Although, since I'm an introvert, of course, that's how I interpret it.
Thank you, Madeline. So now it's going to be Shrikant, followed by Penny and Peichi. So I want to read again. I really find these first 4 lines really fascinating, very beautiful. I mean, that's what I love about the Tao, the way they express things. I'm going to use the Ursula Le Guin's translation. When the world's on the way, they use horses to haul manure. When the world gets off the way, they breed war horses on the common. The first part of saying they use horses to haul manure, and I like the way in which Jason puts it, work the fields. When you're on the way, you're actually doing things. On one hand, it may seem very simple, nondescript kind of an activity. But at the same time, it is profoundly regenerative activity. It is you're basically building life when you're on the way. It may not look grandiose. It may not be very showy, and it is not very showy, but you are really building life. And when you're off the way, they breed war horses on the common. So all the common areas, so all the major focus of people is to breed war horses, to get power over other people. Here, in the first case, when you're on the way, you are working with nature, with people, with civilization to build things up. And otherwise, you're acting against it. Thank you. Next up is going to be Penny, followed by Paige. Penny.
Hi, it's Brian.
Brian.
Yeah, I really liked the Tao Te Ching, and I was really surprised to hear this and to read and hear this one because honestly, the thing that really struck me was that in this verse, war is not considered part of the Tao. And that seems unrealistic to me. Whereas most of the other verses in the Tao Te Ching seem very realistic. Quan has already spoken to this in a way, and so has Jason. So maybe that's enough. But I wanted to share that this is, I agree with the aspirations expressed in this verse, but as Quan said, I think it needs to be if it's like the other verses of this book, I think it needs to be understood in a realistic framework.
Thank you. Amon wants to respond to it, and then Paige. Amon.
Yeah, actually, I think what Brian and what Quan were saying, it reminds me of a cliche that I've heard, which is it's easy to be a monk on the mountain. It's much harder to be a monk in the city. It is vastly more difficult to understand when enough is enough, to be content in the tumult of a world that has demands of you and has strife elevating to the level of war. And so here, when he's saying that in times when the Tao is being followed, war horses don't need to exist. It's not that the war is not a part of the Tao, but war is a disharmonious action between people. Almost by definition, that's exactly what it is disharmony between two peoples. You are not being told never engage in it. But if you were to engage, could you know enough? Could you say, all right, I beat them badly enough. I've been here long enough. I've suffered enough. I know when to say when and cut my losses. The lesson of knowing when enough is really vital for anyone. But as Jason was pointing out, if you're giving this as advice to a princeling, it's even more paramount, because then you may have coolie labor and conscripted soldiers that you are just pouring onto a battlefield, man after man after man, and your ego gets involved because you're just convinced that it's just that much further to reach. I'll get my goal with just that much more. So being extolled to know when to say when, and remember that if you're being sucked in to this artificial disharmony, because war is an artificial disharmony, it occurs in very few other species. And then only because of dire straits. I'm thinking mostly of ants. You need to know when to cut loss and not double down and take the entire kingdom with you.
Thank you, Amon. A quick comment from Jason, followed by Paige. Jason.
Yeah, I just have a question to Brian. You talk about most of the Tao Te Ching deal with war or associates war.
No, I did not. I did not mean to say that. No.
Okay, so I misunderstood. Okay, so thank you. That's fine.
Thank
I just
you.
want to make sure nobody has a totally wrong concept.
Thank you. Next up is Paige, followed by Nick. Paige.
Thank you. Firstly, let me quickly respond to Brian's observation. I think you were quite right. There are some verses, actually quite a lot of them, are very, in your word, is very, very realistic, and reflect the reality. And yet there are some verses seems to be very ideologist. And so to reconcile these two, I think it's actually probably an indication that the book has not been fully realized, understood. And so I encourage Brian to look further, more deep, and probably you should look at various different translations, because some of the information are not being translated in many versions. Now, let me go back to this verse. It's a short verse, but I see it is still very consistent with the whole line of the teaching from the book. The first two lines, the author paint a picture about in a peaceful time, in a peacetime, and in a wartime, and using the horse as the metaphor. The second line about the translation of the second line, I noticed can be different, which they are either can be correct, it depends on how you read it, but it does not affect the underlying meaning. Why is when it's nations at war and when it's in peace. The next part is really try to draw the cause of the war. Well, firstly, it did mention about when you not follow the war, follow the Tao, and why is the follow the Tao, you will have the peace or the war. And then it continues saying to elaborate. It is the greed that often causes the war, right? Because once it's not enough and they wage the war. So that's the cause. Now, I think Armand mentioned very well about the enough, knowing enough. It really should reflect the every step of the way. You know, when one does not know enough, they wage the war. And when one is engaging in war, for example, when you need to defend, or even you attack, and when you have, seen the opponents surrounded or retreated, and there is a moment one should also need to reflect and know when is enough, when to stop. Sadly, unlike what we observe, the fighting between the animals, you can see they are well versed with this notion of knowing enough, because you see animal, they always stops when they have fulfilled their initial goal of either territorially, they have win the battle, or they have got a food, and they will never go all the way, try to, like a human do, try to think about the next day, and they want to simply eliminate the animal, or the enemies, because they feel the enemy next time they will attack again. So the human will go all the way. Now let me go back to the cause. Why we have the notion of not enough? Why we need more? Why we not following the Tao? Why we following Tao? I think this is really the difference between engaging our intellect versus listening to our awareness. We've been given the faculty of being intelligent, have the intellect we can engage to analyze, to even foresee, to analyze the pattern, to plan for the future, blah, blah, blah. And we can acquire the knowing, even something not necessarily we immediately needed. So that sort of faculty that individual have, I think is the purpose is for individual to live our life a different way. Now, when we are too much focusing on this, the intellect, particularly, we do have a desire to exercise this because the intellect that we have seems to be different between each individual. And we have different strengths, but we do have different sort of capacity in intellect. That make us naturally, I think that could be the source of the ego. That's how most of us have that sort of ego. And we want to be different. We want to show him being, admired by others. And also because rely on our intellect, we will always feel we haven't had enough. We also feel that others are different from us. We will not realize we are actually one. And our essence is really awareness. I stop here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Peichi. Next up is going to be Jason, Nick, and Peter and Quan. Jason.
Yeah, I just have a quick question to Peggy. You just mentioned some of the Tao Te Ching chapter deal with war realistically. Can you give me an example? I just cannot think about anyone realistic.
Not at all. My notion about being realistic, that was the follow Brian's observation.
Okay.
That's not related to the war.
Okay, got you. All right,
Yeah,
thank
not
you.
but there is
Yeah.
a few verses 30, 29 talked about the war.
Okay, I will double check because I think that's quite important to me. That's why I have to ask. So
Thank you, Jason. Next up is going to be Nick, Peter, and Quan. Nick.
Yeah, hi. I just want to maybe following Peggy's analyzing of the two lines, share a thought. The first line seems to be his observation of what was going on. And the second line is moral teachings or takeaways from observing of what's going on. So I have a question whether anybody finds a parallel of this moral teaching to the Greek idea, especially the Epicurean idea of regulating our visceral desire.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Does either Aman or Jason want to address that?
I can take a quick stab at it. I think it differs from Epicureans. Epicureans saw pain everywhere, and therefore removing yourself from as much of that as possible and insulated yourself from pain. That was really the big idea of curtailing those sort of visceral emotions and responses. This is something radically different, which is asking you not to give up your sense of awe or your sense of, accomplishment or even a sense of desire, although it does explicitly say there's no greater mistake than wanting to gain. But it's asking you to subvert that. See other things as gains, see other things as desirable, see the things that everyone else disregards. The chapter before this, I gently, paraphrase as peace and quiet. See those kind of goods as an ultimate thing to gain. And if you can do that, you don't have to sublimate, your visceral emotion. You don't have to repress it. You don't have to avoid pain. You'll encounter it, understand it, move on to the next thing.
Thank you, Amon. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, let me quickly, thank you, Amang, for the Epicurean question, but I'm more interested on Nick's excellent observation, right? The first two lines, how does the first two lines related to rest of that? And that's the part I like Tao Te Ching a lot, because the logic they are using, if you pay attention, they always start with say something obvious, right? So, and or something metaphysical, okay, something like the soft is better than hard, something like this. And then later you talk about the Tao or something simple, then dropped a lesson. So give you something, you see the horse doing this one during the peacetime and horse doing this in the warning time. Then just like Peggy said, what's the cause? Then that's the cause, end of the lesson. I think that's the logic they are using. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Next up is going to be Peter, Kwan, Paul, and Mark. Peter.
There's one, I think, foundational view that I haven't heard addressed yet that I do think is vital in relationship to all of these so far texts we've been reading, and that this is a book of the day, and we're relating to the Tao through the day. That is the lens of which we're viewing the Tao in these verses, compared to, when we go to the verses of the Tao directly. That's right now we're relating to this idea of right relationship, right? This idea of day is the idea of right relationship. Which way do we go? Which way can we go? What does it mean to relate to the Tao? If not correctly, then through perfect day. And so it's these verses reflecting on relationship with the Tao through day. And so then it's important to reflect on, I think, in regards to, regardless of what Tao is, we're relating to it through day and trying to reflect on the relationship of day to relationship to Tao through day.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Let's see. Next up is going to be Kwan. Kwan, go ahead.
Okay, so what Peter said is just perfect for what I want to say, because precisely in the title of the book, Tao Te Ching, okay, Tao is for the heavenly dimension, line 6 and 5 of the hexagram. Te is for the manly dimension, lines 3, 4, and 3 of the hexagram. And Ching is for the earthly dimension, line 2 and 1 of the hexagram. And precisely the Te, the virtues or the powers, if I may say so, is precisely the powers of the mind that man has. And I would say that the metaphor that we should be contented spontaneously like the animals is interesting, because that is a metaphor that comes spontaneously and very often. But I would beg to differ, okay? The animal are contented spontaneously because they are dumb. I'm sorry to be so impolite, but human beings have been granted a brain that is much more developed, and that is our glory and our tragedy, of course. Okay, I'm not saying that the lesson of the Tao Te Ching is not valuable. The lesson is extremely valuable because nature gave us that brain, which is so powerful. And like all powerful toys or all powerful tools, we need, as a species, as a collectivity, learn how to use it in connection with heaven, and not in connection with only earth, okay? Because earth precisely is, and I'm sorry, maybe it's the psychiatrist in me that is speaking, earth is precisely the dimension of the dumb animal, okay? The instincts, the reflexes, and the automatism. And of course, when you are living at the dimension of reflex, instinct, and automatism, it's quite easy to be contented, because the animal will just want to fill his belly, and after that he doesn't have imagination to go further. I want to remind everyone that the Nazis were in love with the teaching of the Lao Tzu, because I don't remember in what stanza, But Lao Tzu advised, and I'm not saying that Lao Tzu is a Nazi. Okay, please don't take me wrong. But in one of the stanza, it's written, fill the belly of the people and empty their mind. Okay, so it is the Nazis were absolutely ecstatic with that principle: fill the belly of the people and empty their mind. Well, it's exactly what the animals are, because they don't have a very big developed brain. When their bellies are filled, they are very contented, of course. But once again, I want everyone not to take me wrong. I'm just saying that Lao Tzu is simply saying to us, we have to develop the powers of our brain at the intellectual level, which is the level 2, but also at the emotional level, which is the level 3, but also at the soul level, number 4, also at the cosmos level, level 4 5, and also at the self, meaning the pure awareness level, which is level 6. So once again, sometimes some metaphor are just irritating me, and I just want to remind that the lesson of the old master, because Lao Tzu, as everyone knows, means the old master. The lesson of the old master is to remind us to develop the whole potentiality of what we are, and we have been endowed with a very big brain, which is a gift, of course, but a dangerous gift that we have to learn to deal with. I stop here.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Quan. Next up is going to be Paul, followed by Mark. Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Quan, for that, because I'll start with a comment on what you just said about the second part of this verse, which I think it's important, based on what you're saying, to notice that he's not just valuing contentment, he's valuing awareness of contentment. So he's in that meta. An animal isn't conscious of its state of contentment, and he puts in a high place the consciousness of the state of contentment. That's just a point. I think it's echoing your point in a way. But on the first part, I think it's really like incredible imagery what he says about the horses giving birth on the battlefield. So that conjures to me an apocalyptic vision of non-stop war. There's not even time for the horse to get the new horses are born with guns in their hand on the field of death. I mean, birth on the battlefield. I'm just reading that into that as another point, echoing the point that when is enough enough? Without the Tao, the horses never rest. They make love, they give birth on the battlefield. The war is just perpetual. So just 2 points on there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Next up is Mark.
Thanks, Shrikant. My question is about who are the horses? I know the idea of metaphor has come up, but if the horses are hauling manure, it means they're taking something which is perceived to be of no use, but putting it to use. And I'm wondering, I know the word ma in these dialects can mean many things, but metaphorically speaking, are we the horses?
Jason or Ramon?
Well, usually I don't take this one as a metaphor. So when usually when the book say horse, I see it's a horse. When he said the baby, that's a baby. So that's the way I take it. Anyway.
Amon, is horse a horse?
It is, but it's also emblematic. We talked about this during the Art of War. I'll be as terse as possible. Warfare had been changing in the time of the 100 schools. And so whereas once before what you would have for warfare were hegemons and princes and warlords going out to do sort of ritualistic chariot battle, now you were fielding gigantic conscript armies of foot soldiers. But that idea of the horse as the auspice of the nobleman and as an instrument of war. That remained. That has carried through. So when he's talking about using your best horse to till soil, it would be akin to buying a Lamborghini to hitch your fifth wheel to. It's something that would just hit, it would gobsmack the reader as, huh? And so as a metaphor, it's a metaphor of give up your sense of absolute value, of this being the penultimate representation of your worth as a ruler. Let that horse go and do something actually useful.
Thank you, Amon. All right, folks. So we're going now to number 47. We have done that under 1 hour. I'm very impressed. This is the first time. All right.
Shrikant,
Go ahead, Mark.
I did have one more question that was lingering about the translation.
Please go ahead.
The word battlefield doesn't show up in any of the other 8 translations I consulted under Boston University. And it seems, a little more hard-edged than reading suburbs or countryside or outskirts or outside the city. So I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, Mark, thank you so much. Yeah, you are exactly right. Okay, that's I over translate, put this way. Okay, it's not the words is countryside, but since the beginning talking about the war horse, that's very sure. 戎马, okay, that word means war. Okay, so there's no way to untie this countryside as a countryside which has the serenity. There must be the countryside with something. So I can think about better word or better different meaning, but thank you so much. That you are right. So
thank you, Jason. Next up is Kwan. Kwan, go ahead. Oh, just a second. Is there a problem? Give me a second.
Sorry for the delay. Sorry for the delay. I thought that it was the time to read the next stanza, so I have no more.
Yeah, okay. That's excellent. So let's go for the next stanza. All right,
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so translation by Professor Moss Roberts, stanza 47. No need to venture past the door to know this world below the skies, nor peer outside the window frame to see the heavens' words and ways. Distant ventures, meager knowledge. For this reason, men of wisdom know the world, not having walked it, and name it true, not having seen it, and gain success, not striving for it.
Thank you, Kwan. Next up is going to be Penny or Brian.
Okay, I'm going to read Stephen Mitchell. Without opening your door, you can open your heart to the world. Without looking out your window, you can see the essence of the Tao. The more you know, the less you understand. The master arrives without leaving, sees the light without looking, achieves without doing a thing.
Wonderful. Next up is Connie. Connie, go ahead.
Ursula Le Guin, looking far, you don't have to go out the door to know what goes on in the world. You don't have to look out the window to see the way of heaven. The farther you go, the less you know. So the wise soul doesn't go, but knows, doesn't look, but sees, doesn't do, but gets it done.
Thank you. Thank you, Connie. All right. Peachy, would you like to read your translation?
Thank you. Without going out of your home, you know the world. Without peering out your window, you perceive the way of heaven. The further you go, the less you know. Therefore, sages attain knowing without stepping out, recognize without looking, accomplish through non-doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Peji. All right, Amon and Jason.
All right, now, once more without mute. Chapter 47, Heaven's Tao. Without going out the door, you can know the world. Without peeking through your window, you can see Heaven's Tao. The further you go, the less you know. That's why the sage, without traveling, yet knows. Without appearing, is yet renowned. Without seeing, yet knows. Without acting, yet completes.
Thank you, Amon. Sorry, I just inserted the bracket here because I find out there's a two way of reading this sentence. Okay, so let me get this point here. So I think most translation are similar. Basics is talking about the more you do something, the less you get. Okay, that's the you agree or disagree? That's one thing, but basically they talk about the more you do, the less you get. That's the concept talking about. So even said that the further you go, the less you know. So it's opposite. Then you go outside to pursue knowledge. So there would be a lot of people will disagree, but that's the Taoism is talking about knowledge is not pursuing outside, it's pursuing knowledge inward, okay, which is similar to, I remember Bhagavad Gita will agree on this one. The knowledge is going inward, not going outward. That's why you don't go out to get knowledge and you look in, so you don't open the door. I think it's in chapter 50 is talking about this. Close your door, shut your mouth. Okay, that same idea. And or you can go to 庄子, okay, on chapter 2 at the beginning. I think it's chapter 2 at the beginning, talking about chapter 3 at the beginning, it talking about our life is limited, but the knowledge is unlimited. You use your limited time to pursuing the unlimited knowledge. You put yourself in danger. That's in 庄子 chapter 3, okay, talking about. Okay, I think that's also reflect this kind of meaning. So get to the point. Okay, I put a break here for those who know Chinese. Sometimes put 不现而明 or 不见而明. There's a different way because some words are missing and sometimes they have the different words on that. So if you use this one 不现而明, then we will translate as without appearing yet renowned. So this one become a political teaching, right? Basically tell you the ruler, you don't have to be showing off, you don't have to do many things, then you will be recognized as a ruler. So the last sentence, right? 不为而成 basically talk about without action, or you want to call it 无为, then you still can complete your task or what you want to do. So if you read this way, another way you read is 不见而明. Okay, this being read as understanding. So basically, you talking about without seeing, you know. Okay, so that's back to whole subject become an epistemological teaching, right? Tell you don't look outside. You should understand. Okay, don't use external power. You should look inward. Okay, without seeing, you can understand. So they have the two way of reading this one, but I would prefer, but both are consistent with the entire chapter. So that's why I put both together. If I would prefer one to the other, I will choose. But here I put both together because I feel both are equally good enough. Yeah, thank you. Amang, please.
Thank you, Jason. And I'm going to resist some of my lesser urges to poke polar bears. And instead, I'm going to try and give you an example of knowledge through Wu Wei, because this is a very difficult idea to wrap your head around. You can take an animal and return it to the wild if you have approximated that same environment for it in its initial rearing. If you care for it like it's a zoo creature and then release it into the wild, it doesn't yet generally do well. In fact, they usually starve or die. Even transplanting an animal, you can take it from one zoo setting into another zoo setting, one reserve to another reserve. But making this transition back into the natural world is very, very difficult. It usually only works if you capture it from someplace in the natural world and return it. So if there's a grizzly bear marching around out here in the Cascade Mountains and the mountaineers get terrified and they go out, capture it, they can take it up to Yellowknife, let it go. They could take it around the planet to, you know, the Andes and let it go. It still knows how to survive in the world because it has been in the world. This is the idea that you don't have to go to the Andes to know how to survive in the Cascades. You don't have to go all around the world to gain all the knowledge that you need to be a successful and functional human being. That exists right here in your immediate environment. And this is really difficult to try and wrap our heads around because we've obfuscated that almost from the get-go. From the moment we put you in swaddling clothes and give you, you know, a blanket and a pacifier, and we have arrested your natural environment. So now we are going to have to try and learn how to survive naturally from what was before then. And that is a radically difficult thing to do. I'm glad Jason brought up Zhuangzi, because Zhuangzi took the ideas of the Tao Te Ching seriously, more seriously than most people. And when he said, you don't need to go outside to learn more, he was like, fine, I will stay in my yard. I will stay at home. I don't care who invites me where to do what. This is all I need in the world. When he said, you know, invest in loss, gain, don't desire to gain, Zhuangzi took that very literally. And he also told people, you who are trying to get better jobs, better clothes, more educated, are fooling yourselves because you're in a rat race that you can't win.
Thank you. Thank you, Amon. All right, folks, would love your comments on this verse. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. We're going to start with Yulia, followed by Quan. Yulia.
Right. So this seems to me like it's saying that the Tao is some sort of essence that you should be able to see in any form that's around you. And I was thinking of this, and I was thinking about how, let's say, you know, you're in a certain village, and all the women in that village have been socially trained to be very passive. If you don't ever leave your village, you might confuse the form and the essence and think that, well, this is just the essence of femininity, is passivity, right? Because you have had no exposure to other forms that that essence can take. So that was just something that was on my mind. I think that it occurred to me that if you don't see any other forms, you might get confused between form and essence. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Yulia. Peter, sorry, I skipped you. Go ahead, Peter.
Oh, all good. So I'm going to go off the deep end a little bit here. And I'm going to, in somewhat semi-agree with Peiji in relationship to the intellect on this one. Is the idea in deep meditation. Let's say you go to a place and you stop all external stimuli. It is completely dark and completely silent, and all you have is the inner workings of your soul, of your mind, with eyes closed. That there's nothing. And I think a lot of people, their options are either to engage the intellect or to try to stop everything. This inner quietism, right? Trying to get rid of internal stimulation. And I would say that's trying to close the mind's eye. That in the deep, deep levels of introversion, there are so many places. That's this idea of the microcosm in regards to all of the different realms that one can go within. It's mind-boggling when it comes down to all of these different mapped networks that the mind can go that have nothing to do with the intellect. And it's not just merely going into memory, but of this idea of that the universe is within you, and as such, there are whole various endless schools throughout the world exploring these deep internal states in different ways. And I think it's a real shame when people they have when they sit down to meditate, they either try to force a quiet or they're engaging in repetitive mind or intellectual mind, when those things make up such a small, shallow part of all that can be experienced deep within. And so to me, in these verses, it really is calling about, the interaction with the heavens, this idea that the stars up above have a relationship to what is within, and that there are ways of navigating them if we only get the sensitivity and let's say in this regard the degree of dispassion, so that we can allow the quiet within, so allow the faint distant stars to shine and to twinkle, so that the subtlety of relationship can be cultivated.
Beautifully put, very poetic. Thank you. That's a great point. It's basically speaking for the power of intuition, power of, the ability that we have of kind of communing with the Tao, with the universe. Thank you. Next up is going to be Kwan, Akshat, David, and Madeline. Kwan.
Okay, so my commands will be a mix of political command and metaphysical command. Okay, let's not forget that Lao Tzu was living in a world of aristocrats traveling between principalities on diplomatic mission. So I'm not sure that he was thinking to those diplomats when he wrote that, but it's one possibility. And here, I want to come back to the image of the hexagram, but I would like you guys to imagine the hexagram as inscribed within a circle. Okay, so what the three lines of the lower trigram, when it's inscribed within a circle, would be on the periphery, and the three lines of the upper trigram would be at the center. And I would say that my commands is political and metaphysical at the same time, because I think that the old master wanted, well, maybe us to have a kind of image like that, in the sense that we are both political and metaphysical. And when I suggest that my interpretation, that when he suggests that no need to venture past the door to know this world below the skies and to see the heavens' words and ways, precisely to see the heavens' words and way, let's not forget that heaven is like 6 and 5, meaning that it's at the center of the circle. So it is an invitation. Once again, the master wants us to be wholly human, not animal, but not ghost. We have to get the lower trigram or the outer trigram, but also the upper trigram or the inner trigram, right? So to see the heavens' words and ways mean precisely to go into those timeless form of beauty, goodness, and truth that I want to speak like the Greek, and to have an order within our mind precisely in order to put the right hierarchy, meaning, yes, we have an intellect, but the intellect is not the master, but the servant. And the master is pure awareness or intuitions or the timeless form of beauty, goodness, and truth. And once we have that dimension of the inner trigram or upper trigram, it is okay to be involved in the world. And maybe I want to go back with what Aman said a half an hour ago. It's easy to be in meditation in the mountains, but it is maybe a higher exercise to be in meditation within the city. But maybe before going to the activities within the cities, you should develop your capacity to be in the inner trigram or the upper trigram before going into the activities of the cities. I stop here.
Thank you, both Quan and Peter, pointing to the inner world. You know, there is the outer world and there is the inner world, and the inner world is very rich, very, very rich, and it is analogous in some ways. So it's beautiful, beautifully put, both of you. Thank you. Next up is Akshat, David, and Madeline. Akshat.
Yeah, that passage I found very interesting. It kind of reminds me of two Hermetic principles. I think the previous speakers mentioned that. It's almost like going to a higher dimension and getting the knowledge of the outside world or from within. And I guess the Hermetic principle that applies to that is as above, so below. But at the same time, I can see the confusion, myself included, about the action, like from a observer that basically lies on the three-dimensional plane. And then to add to that, I guess if you extrapolate the cause and effect principle, then you can say, okay, maybe the action is not really required because the cause for that action or the effect could have come from the environment or someone else or some time far back in time. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Akshat. Great observation. Next up is David, followed by Madeline. David.
Yeah, I want to bring into this what was stated in the previous one, where there's an example given of the horse. And its role there in the ideal was not running free on the plains in nature, wild. It was serving human society in the field in a natural sort of way, apparently, right? Not in war. So in this one, culturally, right, is this really precluding going out into society? I don't think it is. Social building is okay. Improving society in the world, going out and struggling with the natural world. If you're an architect, a creator, an engineer, build bridges, you don't sit at home. It's your nature to create and produce from your ideas. Then you go out as this isn't the rat race performance that you're doing. It's expressing your nature and your nature with nature's own way of being, right? So what nature can be and do, because you see things that nature could express. So it's not a shut-in message, but it's saying maybe you acquire that knowledge before you even go out the door.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Next up is Madeline, followed by Brian. Madeline.
Well, to follow Aman's example from earlier, which is to look at the preceding verse, we have the one about the war horses. And so again, the metaphor is of is something that is properly inside. Should that also be exported outside? And so I also think of the yin energy, that which is shadowed or hidden or obscured or protected. And some of the other verses in the Tao about containers, about a cup or a clay vessel or a bowl shaping something. And then that one about the hub of the wheel, which is empty, where the axle goes in and the spokes go in. And so this also resonates with that for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Madeline. And it's nice to have David and Madeline have the horses roam from one chapter to the next. And I think it works beautifully. inner and outer movement. Next up is going to be Penny or Brian. Penny.
Yeah, and I was actually looking at the previous verse too, and this one, and what kind of struck me is the other one was talking about the dangers of desire, of wanting something for yourself, of not being content. And then in this verse, it's saying, oh, you don't even have to leave your house to be content, to get the things that really are worthwhile to desire, or to get something for yourself, because you can discover the whole world, the inner world, inside. So I just thought that they kind of were saying, well, not only don't you have to go out and try to steal something from somebody else or take it and create a war, you can get all these wonderful riches inside you. You don't even have to go outside.
Thank you, Penny. Aman, you had a comment.
Oh, I didn't want to jump the line. I just am listening to this and I'm trying to reconcile it in my mind. I wanted to offer an example, and in doing so, I'm also going to reveal what a bad Taoist I really am, because I love travel. I delight. My goal is to set foot on 6 of 7 continents. I have no interest in Antarctica. But I found a way to make travel more interesting for myself by giving myself a scavenger hunt. Anytime I go, I decide on a drink of the trip and I try and find the best one. So the best beer in Europe, for example, or the best wine in Sonoma Valley, or etc. I don't have to go there to drink those drinks. I could get them at my local store. I could taste, mojitos made with Cuban rum if I wanted to here. So they're not incommensurate. You don't have to leave your front door to gain knowledge. It's not telling you never leave your front door and that there's nothing more that you'll gain. And in doing so, setting for yourself contentment at a very low bar, trying to find the best drink is not a gigantic Herculean task. It's not like I'm after the Maltese Falcon. I'm after something I can get anywhere. And I have something to reflect on afterwards that makes me content, so that I can come back to home and try and find Czech beers anywhere I can, because incidentally, the Czech Republic makes the best beer in Europe. That was just a discovery I made, but I set the intention before I left.
Thank you, Amon. Jason.
Yeah, I think this one, that the first sentence, okay, that's read in a little bit different way would make more sense, right? The translation, not only Among and my translation, most of the translation doing like, without going out the door, you can know the world. Without peeking through the window, you can see the heaven star. Okay, so that's read in a different way. Say, in order to know in the world, you don't have to go out the door. Okay, in order, if you want to know the heaven's Tao, or the principle, you don't need to peek through the window. So in another word, it's not like ask you don't go out, don't look outside. Ask you like the purpose of understand the world. Okay, the purpose of understand Tao is not by travel around the world or by looking outside. It's on your inward looking. So we can read in this way. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to make a quick comment and then we'll go to Peichi, followed by Mark. One of the themes that we kept coming back to in Bhagavad Gita was that of center and periphery. Tao is also like that. It's like returning to the center. It's like the base from which everything comes and returns. It's similar to what Quan was talking about, what is at the center, because what is at the center is actually driving the periphery. So it's not center versus the periphery, but kind of situating yourself at the, you know, core of awareness, core of kind of universality, whatever you want to call it. But this kind of center and periphery, that the focus on the center is there throughout the Tao. It's saying never lose eye on the center. Even when you're going through the periphery, you have to be guided by the center. Thank you. Next up is going to be Peichi, followed by Mark.
Thank you. This verse indeed seems to be quite counterintuitive. The reason because I guess the word knowing. Now, there are in this book, there are many, the word knowing has been used many, many times, almost in every verse. The knowing here, most of the time in the book, is talking about awareness, being aware. It's not the knowing by engaging your intellect. It's the knowing through the Tao. It is the knowing that you acquired spontaneously without for you making any effort. So the knowing is here is also about the totality, the way of heaven, the way of world. So this is all about the essence. Now, I want to emphasize that all the teachings is not meant for individual to follow, right? If the author thinks individual need to follow that teaching, then he would not advocate non-doing or wu wei. The author see the world is perfect. As an individual, you don't need to change anything. We as an individual assume a different role in life. So you've been given the intellect, use it. So teaching is all about, for the leaders, when someone acting in a collective sense, the author asks you, don't interfere. Let individual be themselves. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peichi. Thank you. Next up is Mark. Mark, go ahead.
Thanks. I was wondering about this tension, if it is a tension in the word knowledge, because as Peiji has just mentioned, it seems to occur so often. And it is, as Peiji and also Kwan have emphasized, pure awareness to which intellect is in some way in service, let's say. But there was something that, Jason, you said earlier, which I know you've said before, and I'm trying to connect it to something that Peiji has said a number of times that he has also repeated. And Jason, you talked about, I think it's pronounced as Zhuangzhou, the great Taoist master. And you have said a number of times, if I understand correctly, that knowledge is infinite, but the human life is finite. And I always thought, okay, that seems like an important insight. Now, Peiji, you have said a number of times in the various few weeks since you've been attending so graciously that we should only learn what we need to know. And we often try to learn everything, but you use the word, what we don't need to know, we don't need to know. So I'm wondering how to bring these two ideas together. And is it that we we should not learn or try to learn what we don't need to know, because life is finite and knowledge is infinite. Thanks.
Yeah, let me respond to you. That's an excellent question here or comment here, and great observation. I'm not going to tell you or tell anybody what we should do. I think that's all the purpose we come here, to get all the information, and we will decide what would be the best way for our own life. I like to repeat. I a lot of time quoting Zhuangzi about the pursuing unlimited knowledge with your limited time. Put yourself in danger. I think also important, this sentence appear on, I think on the chapter 3, which is the famous cook thing. Okay, cut the beef. Okay, the bolak. Okay, why is here? Because the purpose of this teaching, I'm not talking about Lao Tzu, I'm talking about Zhuangzi, is teach you how to preserve your life. Make sure you can live long, healthy. Okay, that's the reason. Because study too hard, okay, and always pursue a higher goal, okay, that would put you in danger. That's the reason. Whether or not you want to do this or not, that's your choice. As I know a lot of lawyers making money through the billable hours. The more hour you put, the more money you make. So the less healthy you become. So that's the balance you need to find out, because you for sure you want to make a certain amount of money. So that's the choice you make. Back to Lao Tzu, especially on this chapter, which you're talking about going out noise, that take the purpose reverse, right? We can read as, you want to know the world. Okay, I want to know what's happened in Russia, in Ukraine, in Saudi Arabia. I don't have to travel around the world. I can think about doing something, right? I want to know the Tao. I don't have to. Okay, here is another thing. Tian Dao, the heavens way, or heavens Tao. It's a double meaning. Okay, also means the astrology. Okay, so you don't have, so it's a little bit double meaning here. So if you want to know the sky, the astrology, you have to look through the window. But that also means the way of heaven. Okay, which means the highest star. Okay, you don't have to by looking study. And I think we probably don't have time for next chapter. Next chapter exactly talking about the same thing, talking about engaging in pursuing knowledge and pursuing Tao, which are two separate way, right? So I think that I will stop here.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Amon, followed by Pechi. And I know that Jason will need to leave at 9:30. So, okay, very good. Amon, go ahead.
Yeah, I just dropped one of my favorite Zhuangzi quotes into the chat for everyone to read, which can give you an idea of the radical understanding of removing desire, removing want, removing the trappings of acculturation. We talk about this in a very unique context, because prior to the 19th.
Amon, may I request you to read that quote for the people who are watching the video?
Sure. The purpose of a fish trap is to catch fish, and when the fish are caught, the trap is forgotten. The purpose of a rabbit snare is to catch rabbits. When the rabbits are caught, the snare is forgotten. The purpose of words are to convey ideas. When the ideas are grasped, the words are forgotten. Where can I find a man who has forgotten words? He is the one, and I'm rephrasing, I would like to have a word with, because Chuang-Tzu likes to be tongue-in-cheek. This idea of knowledge, we have a very skewed version of it after the 19th century, because prior to the telegram, knowledge was what happened in your neighborhood. Even your local newspaper was telling you about, oh, Johnny fell in the well. That's terrible. Did they get him out? It was information pertinent and immediate to your life. With the invention of the telegram, we could get that information from New York to Kansas City in the blink of an eye. And although we didn't know Johnny, and we had no idea where this well was, or if this was, it was just trivia. In fact, the very game Trivia Pursuit was produced to do something with all this idiosyncratic, trivial knowledge that we were being fed because we have an appetite for it. We believe that being more informed made us more intelligent, that we knew more, but it didn't necessarily make us have any more actionable ideas. What is happening in Ukraine and Russian border is probably world consequential, but what I can actually do about it is very minimal. And keeping up to date minute by minute doesn't serve me. It doesn't act, that trivia being informed to me doesn't make me more knowledgeable or more effective in dealing with something like that. So what we see in the Tao Te Ching, what we see in this chapter, recognize this almost 2 millennia in advance, that this avarice pursuit of knowledge for its own sake was a fool's errand that didn't actually make anybody necessarily any more informed or any smarter, any more capable. It, in fact, very often led them on this sort of pursuit of social gain, of playing the acculturation game to a point that they would crack under the stress. So I want to say that what we're all kind of grasping with is a radical idea. It is very anathema to the world in which we have all been acculturated. But we see this idea as the information age and the world of knowledge being at our fingertips as something so eternal that really is only 150, 160 years old. And prior to that, it wasn't the best measure of how capable or how good you were at being a human. Whether or not you knew how to get Johnny out of that well was vastly more important than you knew that it was the 6th time. And well divings are up, incidentally, in the city of Chattanooga this, fiscal season. So ideas for you to wrestle with. It is a departure from our normal model, but it's one that you're being invited to consider, not one you're being told you must do. That's the nice thing about the Tao Te Ching. It gives you an invite to consider it this way, but it never says you must, because it knows that's a recipe to get people not to.
Thank you, Aman. Fantastic observation. I mean, that's the reason why we study, Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, the Gospel of John, because it's actually the highest value it is really offering is a completely different way of thinking, which is not focused on the present, because it's very, very easy to just keep responding to everything that is going on around us and not realizing that that is happening within a very narrow band of what is possible. It's just that it is prevalent, but that doesn't mean that that's the only way to be. And what the Tao is bringing, what all of these great works are bringing, is a different way. And you're right that they are, the thing that I find really special about them is that they're very integrated. They're very grounded. So that's a very reality oriented. They take into account thought, emotion, and body. They take into account individual and social all at once in a single breath. So it's like breathing in and breathing out in a very natural way, where us moderns try to chop things up and think that we are getting something when we take a piece, pieces of this information. But these guys have an integrated way of looking at it. Thank you. Next up is Peichi, Nalini, and Kwan. Peichi.
Thank you. I wish to respond to Mark's excellent question. I mentioned that the author is not mean to change any individual. And however, as individual, we do see the value of following the book's teaching. Now, your question about how to balance, how to, whether we should just purely follow our awareness or the intellect. I would say that as an individual, we have our life to live. So do whatever you desire. However, it will be wise to follow the most effective way. Now, the language, teaching as a language can be seen as a dualistic. And so our understanding should avoid that. So it's not about one or the other. You either intellect or awareness, but rather should embrace them both. As in verse 10 made it very clear about the first line is about challenging you. Are you able to embrace the Tao with your temperament or your intellect? And so whenever you desire something, think about, is that really what you want? I think that's a worth to think about. Now, desire is being mentioned, contrary to what Jason think about the book rarely talk about the desire. It's actually, I counted that there are about close to 30 about 30 occasions the word has been used. Now, if you plus the word non-doing, wu wei, which is effectively asking us to refrain from a desire. The whole book is really talking about desire because everything stems from that desire. And as I said, the desire is really come from the intellect we have. And the animal also have that ego or desire. And the more intelligent the animal is, the more desires and more egos they have. And also you see more accidents come to them. So my emphasis is that the embrace both. When you want to know something, contemplate, but don't stick to your intellect, try to find answer. If you contemplate the question and your awareness will pick up, will consider that you have the need. And when you truly go to the path of your living, then that need will be fulfilled through your awareness. Just watching and listen, and the inspiration, the intuition will come to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peiji. Thank you. Next up is Nalini, followed by Kwan. Nalini.
Hi, this is my first meeting for the series, so I am very new and don't know much about it, but I do have a few questions about, I think, Aman, you explained it very well, that if you are traveling, you decide what you want to do, but at the same time, you can taste that beer right here at home in your, and you don't have to travel. What about the experience that comes with it? If I am going to taste a particular wine, I want to see what kind of a terroir is there, what kind of area is that, how do they grow the wines, and the experience that comes with it. For me, and I think many of you answered that after I raised my hand, that there has to be a balance. So I guess some things I can do at home, but for some things I have to go out. But I guess he is not saying that you can't do it. I guess you have to decide it for yourself. The second question is related to knowledge. Yes, there is a lot of information load on us, overload, and it's difficult to sift through that knowledge to use it for a particular purpose. But I'll give you an example. A patient is in the hospital and the doctor needs the latest information on the medicines and the procedures that can be used to save the patient's life. The librarian has to go and do the research and sort that for the doctor, or the doctor can do that. But for that, you have to go through several publications to get to the pearl of that article, which will save the patient's life. So that is getting out. And I was told that you are a professor, so you do the same in your research. So they came to me as, how do you create that balance? Because, I can sift through knowledge, but I have to sift through knowledge. When I was trying to read the book today, I had to go to different translations because each translation was different. If I hadn't looked at those translations, I wouldn't know anything. So
Excellent.
that's about it.
Fantastic questions. Now let's see.
Do I get to respond to that?
Yes.
Yes.
And thank you. I welcome. It's nice to have you here. How do you reconcile knowing Heaven's Tao with knowing the 10,000 things, the 10,000 many myriad things, the everything? You can't know the everything. And actually, your example of medicine is really interesting because this is where they're showing artificial intelligence systems like Watson, etc., are much better at combing through all the latest and divvying up those results. So it's getting to the point where we can just ask Watson and they'll return the latest research. But that is kind of a punt on your question. You can't know the idiosyncratic details of everything from your home. That is not possible. What you can know are the broad brushstroke patterns that underlie all those idiosyncratic things. So a patient is sick. Human beings get sick. If they are to get well, these are the things that must be in place. They must have a healthy immune response. They must be sick with a pathogen that can be recovered from. You can kind of know the very large brushstrokes. And that's just in medicine. Medicine being one idiosyncratic thing, a large one. But what is the underlying pattern? What is the one universe? Well, we can look at the universal patterns. People are born, they grow, they will have a period of robustness that peaks and ebbs, and they will die. And we can know that universally to be true unless it's somehow artificially arrested. If I know that, then when I go to approach something like medical research, if I'm doing this and beating myself up because I can't find a solution for this patient who is 99 years old and has had COPD for the last 20 years, I shouldn't be beating myself up. That's the aha I ought to have with that. That's the Tao of heaven that I should be able to realize that, yeah, it'd be useful to actually know this information. But this is a 99-year-old sick person who is not going to have robust life after this staph infection. They are not long for the world around us. How can we make their existence as pleasant as possible for as long as they've got? That's a much broader sort of philosophical approach than necessarily a medical approach, and it can be debated. And it's good that there are people who are doing the robust research, the deep dives. I have no qualms with any of them. And I also think that it's valuable to do. That's why I'm engaged in translating this with Jason again, because we did it once. We're going to do it again, because delving deep into something has its own value. But I don't mistake a better knowledge of the Tao Te Ching with a better knowledge of the Tao. That I get through a lived experience.
Thank you. Thank you, Aman.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
No,
Nalini,
thank you. But I was just going to tell Aman that I am actually a medical librarian. And it is very important. You are giving, like you said, one example where a person may be 99 years old. But most of the research that we used to do, or I retired about 6 months ago. But what I used to do was mostly the patients who were admitted, and the doctors needed to know that. So it was a very, very important part. And we could save lives. I am just confused, but I also agree with what you all said, and what Shrikant said was about the peripheral and inner. That part I can kind of, I agree. But I don't know if I agree that because you can't really sift through that new knowledge until you have at least seen it.
Thank you, Nalini. Firstly, Nalini, wonderful to have you here, and I'm
Thank
glad
you.
that you're engaging with, just like you're engaging with Christianity, you're engaging with Tao Te Ching. It's really great. The best, as I understand it, and Aman can correct me. What you see, you have to understand kind of the background of these people. What they're saying is that most people are just focused on the 10,000 things around them. And their entire attention is all about reacting to those 10,000 things.
Okay.
What Tao is trying to do is that he's saying, wait a minute. There is some deeper universal principle that is running through all of this. Pay attention to that. Keep going back to that again and again, because that is the life force. It is not saying anything against the 10,000 things themselves. It is telling you that if you get attached to the 10,000 things and forget the Tao, which is the source of all of it, you will not be able to do much. So you have to keep going back to that. It's like returning to the Tao, returning to the center all the time in order to go back to the periphery. So it is all about living, but living from the center. That's the best way I can put it. Aman, does that make sense to you?
I thought that sounded pretty good. The other thing I'd add is that if you only myopically focus on those things, those tiny things, those idiosyncratic things, you are creating a recipe for misery because you'll lose that context, which is that the context is this is a temporary existence with ebbs and flows. And you have to learn to accept some of that to be not just effective, but not swimming against the current your whole existence.
Thank you. Next up is
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yes, my comment is about precisely what I think.
Kwan, I'm sorry to interrupt. I forgot Paul. Let's go to Paul, followed by Kwan. Paul.
Yeah, that's okay. I love when Quan comments, but I'll go first anyway. The echo, I was really echoing the idea that neither this passage nor anything is saying that there's anything wrong with using the intellect. I'll just call it using the intellect. But I wonder if it's also related to the master emissary concept, like the idea being that knowing the Tao should guide the intellect and should guide how we explore the 10,000 things. And the comment Aman made about Watson just makes me immediately go to, well, here's the risk people worry about with artificial intelligence, which is we haven't figured out yet. I don't know if we ever, I think this is a good question. Is it possible to load into a neural network the Tao, the way of heaven? Because that is what would be required to give a computer the decision-making authority that we are moving toward. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Paul. Next up is Quan. I don't think Lao Tzu had too much to say about it, though. Sorry about that. No. It's a great question. Basically, it is the awareness, it is the conscience, it is the higher faculty of making kind of. There are things that are missing from computer because it's a machine. Wonderfully put. Thank you. Next up is Quan.
Yeah, I will make my comment first, and after I will take 30 seconds in relation with what Paul just said. I like very much the metaphor that that many spiritual masters used, that a beggar would go in the world and one day he would find in his pocket a diamond. Okay, of course, all of us here understand that the diamond is the Tao, of course. Okay, it's the pure awareness, is the omnipresence of reality. My comment was precisely what would be the right education that would allow a child to record, because we have a biological recording machine or bio machine, and there's nothing wrong with that bio machine. It's probably the most awesome machine in the universe, but of course I'm biased. But what would be the right education to let that bio machine function by itself? And it's absolutely okay. But that the child, and you know that most children will start to speak at 2 years old, right? So 2 years old is the chronological point from which the bio machine is starting to run at the level of the intellect, okay? Because between 0 and 2, the bio machine is also running, but it's more at the sense perception level, or line 1 of the hexagram, if you want. And the line 2, the intellect is starting to run seriously from 2 years old. And what would be the perfect education that would allow the bio machine to run normally and spontaneously its natural course, but at the same time allowing the children to discover the diamond in their pocket, let's say at 2 years old and 3 months, rather than at 28 years old, or at 35 years old, or at 55 years old, at 80 years old, or sadly sometimes never. That would be, I think, the major criterion for an advanced civilization, because it is absolutely normal that we are obsessed with the 10,000 things because they are shining and they are very interesting. But it is possible, I think, that if we discover the diamond in the pocket before, let's say once again at 2 years and 3 months, that we would be capable to enjoy those 10,000 things without too much suffering. And here, I think that maybe there is a training to be done and an education to be done almost at the same time, okay? And since I'm a little bit pedantic, I remind that education is from Latin educare, to bring forth what is from within. And what is from within is precisely the diamond in the pocket that should be put on the table and not forgotten in the pocket. And I take 30 seconds about what Pon just said about, he alluded to the master and the emissary, obviously, about the books by the neuropsychiatrist or the psychiatrist, he's a psychiatrist, Ian McGintrish, I think published in 2009, but he also published a new book in 2021, which title is The Matter with Things. And in that Matter with Things, he explained very well the neurobiological circuits making the difference between the master and the emissary or the servant. Okay, let's use the traditional terminology, the servant and the master. According to our present neurobiological understanding, because those things can evolve, of course. I don't want you guys to understand that as something completely frozen. It's the present state of our understanding. The master is more the right hemisphere, because the right hemisphere is much more in terms of globality, of whole perception, of beauty, of the rhythm, of philosophy, but in the sense of Lao Tzu, meaning in the sense of Confucius, in the sense of Plato, in the sense of St. Augustine, in the sense of St. John, meaning that philosophy is a journey to wisdom, to valor, to humanity, and to justice, okay? And not a guy in a classroom talking about different concepts, ending with ism, and fighting which ism is better. So that kind of stuff, it's more right hemisphere according to our understanding now. And it's slower than the left hemisphere, because it's slower because it's something like meditation, okay? It's something deeper, slower, more comprehensive, more pervasive. And the left hemisphere is more about fight and flight, okay? So there's a neural circuit that connect the limbic system, which is the primary seat of primary emotions, to the left hemisphere, which is much shorter in terms of distance than the longer circuit connecting the limbic system to the right hemisphere. That's why when the left hemisphere is dominant, people tend to react to the 10,000 things automatically, very fast, without taking the time precisely to come back to the center or to remember that they have a diamond in their pocket and they should put it on the table and on their forehead rather than in the pocket. So neurobiology is still a very young science, but I just want to say that to inform you guys that sometimes the old meditation master 25 centuries ago, like Lao Tzu or the master of the Upanishad, reached to deeper conclusion because they were in their inner world, and that we only found the external justification in terms of neurobiology 25 centuries later. I stop here.
Wonderful, a fantastic comment, Kwan. This is great. You know, I would love to kind of explore that book further. I think we've done like 1 or 2 meetups on it, but not too much. You know, his Ian McGilchrist's work, and this point about right brain and left brain, and it's all you know, all on the dot. Excellent. All right, so it's about close to 10 o'clock. Amon, do you want to say anything before you leave? And then we'll go to Peichi.
I just want to thank everybody again and say Xin Yin Kuai La, Happy New Year to everybody. Eat noodles, get Hong Bao, see your family. It's the year of the dragon. It's the year of the wood dragon. So don't go making any big investments. Have a great week. I'll see everybody next week.
Thank
Good
you.
night, Amon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is going to be Peichi. So Peichi, what would you like to talk about today?
Thank you. Let me share my
I want to apologize for last time. I lost sense of time I have a alarm. We will end sharp at 11 o'clock. That's one thing. And it's not it's very unusual for me to kind of do kind of comparative thing. We'll want to focus on Tao most of the time. Occasionally we will do comparative things, but mostly we'll be focusing on the Tao. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Let me share my screen.
Give me just a second. Hold on. Let me go ahead and make you a co-host. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, here's the appendix, the self-reflection. It is not directly from the book. It is inspired by the book. I hope that in a way can help to understand the contents of the whole book. This is quite a challenging task in relation to self-reflection. Who am I? It's a central, age-old question. I'm attempting here, use a slightly different angle, and also in conjunction with a bit of Chinese mythology, and also in relation to what Lao Tzu was thinking in relation, what is being revealed from the book as inspired. I was inspired by the book. The common saying posits, I'm the body and the soul, or alternatively, I'm the body, the mind, and the spirit. Now, Chinese mythology provides another perspective, suggesting that a human comprises a body, a set of resident spirits, and a set of floating spirits. So as the diagram suggests, one is not directly attached to your body, but floating around. In this context, resident spirits resides in the bone, reflecting your personality, while inspiration comes from the floating spirits. According to Chinese, ancient Chinese belief, illness occurs when the floating spirits are separated from the resident spirits. And at death, the floating spirits returns to heaven, while the resident spirits return to earth. In verse 10 of the book, Lao Tzu implies that floating spirits are the one. What I'm trying to say is, in verse 10, Lao Tzu mentioned the resident spirit, but left out the floating spirits. In the position of floating spirits, Lao Tzu used term one, the Tao, the mother of all beings. So I read this as Lao Tzu thinks, like I was thinking, there is no spirits other than Holy Spirit. So there is only one, that is the Tao, as the spirits that people are speculating. And further, I mentioned many times, the Tao sounds mysterious, but it's actually the awareness, the pure consciousness within us. That is really the floating spirits. Why it's floating? Because it's always there, it's everywhere, and never dies, have no beginning, no ending. So Lao Tzu emphasized you should embrace the two together. So I put a diagram there to speculate that, as enlightened one, who would always, always embrace the two without separation. We always use the Tao, use the awareness, use this floating spirit as the host, as the real host, as the king of the castle. And so in terms of contemporary term, I guess I mentioned here is, in modern terms, the self comprises, composition can be understood as having a body, subconsciousness, and pure consciousness. Now, this is come down to, whenever we referring to our conscious mind, is really about the two, either subconsciousness or pure consciousness. And we, as an individual, we often operate in either subconsciousness or pure consciousness. Subconsciousness is something we are, when we are engaging our analytical mind, we are engaging our intellect. We are in deep thinking. We are very much on our brain. On the other hand, the pure consciousness or the awareness is always built within us. When a life starts, it's actually took the Tao or awareness as its host. That's how the life begins. It begins with that. And that's what I mean by the Tao creates beings. And the life ends by losing the consciousness, which we all know, a matter of fact. So subconsciousness is something not a real consciousness. It's seemingly like a consciousness, but it is really about engaging our intellect, try to use the data we already remembered or we already accumulated, which is our life experience, the data in our memory. They are really reflect the past. We try to use that to address the problem of present. We try to foretell, predict the future. We want to plan for the future because we have no confidence to the hidden awareness that will guide us because it's hidden. We're not aware, even though it's guiding us on a daily basis or almost a minute basis, right? Everything we do, we walk, all the cognitive thing is really reflected awareness. The instinct, the intuition, I regard they are all really coming from awareness. And this awareness is really the host. This awareness is really us. Without this, we cannot comprehend anything. Now, the AI is now become more popular, and whoever uses AI or develop AI, they will more and more will realize what the essence of human being is. Because AI does not have that. AI will surpass anyone where the environment for the solution is fixed. All the rules are known. Only then the AI will surpass us. Why? Because AI has more energies, more resources, more data than any individual. Therefore, in a space, in a subject matter that only related to all the rules that is known can be spelled out. the AI will beat us. So that's in many fields. Playing chess is a very good example because the game of chess, the rules clearly can be defined. Therefore, human will have no hope to beat AI once it's developed. So anyone want to take the playing chess, playing game as their profession, they should think again. Now, any area, including medicine, some parts really will be replaced by AI, because if the symptom is known, all the tests can be done, the AI will produce more comprehensive the solution, the plan. However, AI can really replace human? The answer is never. Why? Because AI doesn't have awareness. We human do. And each individual human have the potential. It's all matter of whether the area that we apply the AI have a clear rule can be defined or not. Right? In many areas, there is very hard to spell out all the rules, including medicine. There are things that AI may not able to pick up, the diagnosis, right? You need that creativity, you need awareness. And also the AI, because it doesn't have the awareness, it does not actually comprehend, understand what it produces. So it can make a very silly mistake. So I'm sort of go away from this the appendix I try to share. So let me continue. So subconscious reflects your traits and the life experiences constitute a significant factor in your personality. Pure consciousness, this paragraph is very much I already mentioned. So I'll come down to using this metaphor, I think we can understand the term the better. Now, the normally people commonly being translated as virtue, the power. This term is probably predated the book. Lao Tzu used this term, borrowed this term. In verse 21, Lao Tzu specifically want to point out the is to follow the Tao. The is something reflect to the Tao. So if Tao is the pure consciousness, the is really the individual's state of consciousness, state of awareness. Or put it simply, it is self-awareness. And if you look at verse 51, you realize it is the that shape each individual. So the reflect your state of conscious mind. That conscious mind sometimes with your subconsciousness, sometimes with a pure consciousness. And in the most critical moments, you are always with the pure consciousness, because your pure consciousness will always make you aware. It's just a matter of whether you ignore it or not. When in a critical moment, you will follow your awareness, like extreme pain. When there is a extreme, a smelling, the foul smelling, loud sound, all those things, you will be waked up by your thinking, from your thinking. But in other time, we just ignore our awareness. because we are in deep thinking. And people in depression, very likely in that state of constantly thinking. In that mode, they usually exhibit indecisiveness because they cannot be sure the solution provided by their thinking are right. So they always wavering, undecisive. And that moment, they simply forgot their hidden treasure, the Tao, the awareness. Have you ever noticed or had experience when in a critical moment and suddenly you had awareness and your reaction to the awareness is, that's right, that's the way to go. You will not have a moment of doubt. And that's when you had that awareness. You had awareness guided you. So my last conclusion here is when one is dominated by the subconsciousness, the connection is frail, resulting in a deluded state. This size of the disconnection gap between your personality and the pure consciousness or subconsciousness and pure consciousness is really determine the degree of delusion. And regardless of gap, pure consciousness persists in every being, because without the pure consciousness, it means you're dead. You lost consciousness. So the key to reducing or eliminating the gap lies in being present, which means be mindful, engaging non-doing, wu wei. So the wu wei and the mindfulness, they are really synonym. It's all talking about being present. Minimize your engagement with the intellect. If you do, just remember to come back. Always be guided by your awareness, because that awareness is the king of your castle. The similar line from Bible. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Peichi. This is amazing. Thank you. If you could just stop sharing the screen. Would love to hear people's, because I want to give a chance for people to ask you questions. And this is just, very profound. Thank you so much. So folks, go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to ask any questions or make any short comments. I want to get different people engaging with what Peichi said. All right, Kwan, go ahead.
First, PG, once again, I know that I repeat that often, but what you say is absolutely outstanding and awesome. That being said, I just want to have a hint. It doesn't have to be now; it can be much later. But there is an excellent book from the Chinese classical tradition named "The Classic of the Yellow Court," that it would be absolutely awesome to read one day. I just want to say that because it is one of the source, or even the source of the metaphor that PG used, the king of the castle or the master of the castle. And the distinction is just perfect. Okay, the diamond is precisely what you say. It's Hun, okay, the floating spirit, and that floating spirit. Maybe we should not. I don't know. Should we remove the S as spirit, because that floating spirit is truly universal and is one for everyone, right? So maybe it's a small detail. I may be a little bit too picky, but I think we should remove the S. And the other paw for individuality, the resident spirit, absolutely, and ghost. I would say that I would add Gui, okay, and I expand why. Because and for the people who don't know Chinese, if you look at floating spirit and resident spirit, you see that the character at the right is the same for the two. Okay, only the radical at the left is different. Gui is the stuff at the right, how to write it. Because in psychodynamics there is three ascending concepts, which is very close to Gui, Pa, and Hon, meaning the ghost, the resident spirit, and floating spirit, the one. And that is precisely the personality, the individuality, and pure consciousness. The personality precisely are the different layers of mask of memory that we accumulated from the voices of others. Okay, since the word persona, because sona is sound, and that persona in ancient times was the kind of big mask that the Greek and the Roman comedians were putting on their face, because around the mouth you have a kind of funnel, which is a kind of primitive micro to expand their voice, okay, to amplify their voice. So that personality is precisely the layers of voices from the others, okay, the influences that we got in our childhood, in our young age, that are the ghosts, the Gui, okay, that would be there and that would be dominating us if we don't have the courage, the valor to do our things. Okay, I like very much that expression from New York, do your things. And when you do your things, it is then precisely that you will let the development of the poor of the individualities. Okay, and I agree with you, PG, that the resident spirits should have an S, because we can have many interests and many foci of enthusiasm that would help us build our individuality. But I would make the hypothesis that most of the time, the major foci of enthusiasm is probably at the most between 3 and 5. Okay, it's very rare that someone would have more than 5 foci of big interest that would direct his life. And finally, the level of pure consciousness would correspond to Hon, meaning being, pure awareness, etc. So once again, old wisdom and new science are embracing each other with the development of science to a broader perspective. And here I'm a little bit biased. I often see the science of the 19th century as a little bit low key or low quality science, a little bit imprisoned in the intellect. And the science of the 20th century, of the 21st century, is beginning to liberate itself from the prison of the intellect and to give the hands to the old sages. I stop here.
Wonderful.
Just
Great.
a quick response.
Please take your time to respond. Go ahead.
The reason I put the plural form for the Huan and the Po, simply because that is reflected in the Chinese mythology. In many books mentioned about there are 3 floating spirits and 7 resident spirits. I'm using that, but I think they are really illusory. It's not reflect the real. Like I mentioned in the appendix, there is only one.
But PG, sorry, I interrupt you. I think maybe that the old Chinese sages were not so dumb. 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. I think it's that. You know, beauty is not complete without goodness and truth is not complete without beauty and goodness, and etc. You know, maybe that 3 means that, but that's my hypothesis. That's all.
Well, as I said, I'm not endorsing this mythology. And neither Lao Tzu was advocating this at all. He simply didn't mention the Hun at all. He just put that place with the, replace that with the one. Really, the one is enough. We are all one. Now, I think all those, the concept of a ghost is really a matter of either can consider is illusion, or simply the expression of something that is beyond the metaphysics. So it's up to individual how you want to express, but it really means nothing to anyone else, because
Absolutely.
it cannot be described. As soon as you describe in the language, it's already incomplete, inaccurate. This including the concept of a reincarnation.
Can you
That's
expand
my
on that?
personal view. Yeah.
Can you expand on
This
that?
is my personal view. Lao Tzu didn't mention this. I tell you, now, if you understand, accept, in essence, we are the Tao, we are the pure consciousness, then everything is resolved. You, Guan, is my incarnation, reincarnation. Everyone is my incarnation, reincarnation, right? Think about it.
Right. Yes. Well, I don't have to think about it because I reached the
Yeah.
same conclusion in the
And
sense that
you see, the Tibetan Lama, Dalai Lama,
yeah,
when he's seeking someone as a reincarnation, right? People may be skeptical. I was skeptical, but now I realized it makes sense. It makes sense in a sense that if I'm the Dalai Lama, if I'm truly enlightened, realized, I will have no concern whether the wrong person will be picked up as a reincarnation, because everyone is the right one.
yeah, sure. Everyone is the right one for the floating one. Absolutely. But you know, according
So I
to the
will stop
mythology,
here. Yeah.
but you know, I just want to take 10 seconds. According to the mythology, as you say, if you absolutely identify with the floating one, you will never go down to the 10,000 things again. You know that.
Thank you, Kwon, and thank you, Peachy. This is wonderful conversation. Next up is Paul. Paul.
Wow, that was an amazing dialogue. That was worth the night just there. So thank you guys. And actually, I was vastly disappointed when Quan said he was going to take the plural away, and Peiji agreed, because that is what got me most interested in your presentation. And you just explained why, because, and it relates to I wasn't at all thinking of all the Trinity things Srikant has talked about, but now I am. But I mean that it's very, if you're working on some sort of path, just thinking about the one, there's something that's a bit impossible to work with there. So there's these aspects of three that are really all the one, but it's somehow, as you're working toward it, useful to think of them. And that's what I saw here, because just having this one spirit that is true, it might be totally true, it's the one and the Dalai Lama and all that. But when you're just trying to sort of pull it into your consciousness, your awareness, I'll say, to think of it as the floating spirits, I find hugely helpful, because then you can distinguish where you have trouble with it and where you don't, things like that, because each has a different face, you know? So that's my comment.
Peachy, would you like to comment?
I have a quick response. Yeah, this is amazing. What you are saying is really reflect each of us have the desire to categorize, to divide, to differentiate, rather than seeing everything is a one, which is absolute, which is correct. We have a desire to want to know details. That's how what the I Ching is. You're looking at the world as a two rather than one. Yin and yang, black, white, and the beautiful and ugly. And then you are still not satisfied. Obviously, two is too few. You want to divide it by four, right? Four quadrants, right? You will analyze. We use a lot about the analyze the personality. You are in this quadrant, in that quadrant, and as soon as we do that, as soon as we depart from one, everything become relative. Everything become incomplete, and will very much make us to overlook that everything is interconnected, right? If we are thinking about you're either black or white, so we didn't realize they are interchangeable, they are interdependent. Same thing about the 4 and 5 and whatever, right? Now, there is people talking about, ancient Chinese are thinking about the universe can be represented by 5 elements. And I was told that that's also derived from the insight that the I Ching has shed the lights on us. Now, we all know the I Ching come up to like 64. The hexagon, the probably Guan knows better than me. You see, when you look at the world can be divided by that many, you suddenly feel, oh, there are lots to play with. You can predict, you can look at different combination, right? That's similarly to many other places, civilization in the world. Our intellect make us realize partial insights of the universe. Even though there is vast variety of forms, we realize there is a pattern, right? Through the pattern, we see the math. And by seeing the math, our desire arouses. We want to predict. That's what this is. The human being went down to the path that they emphasize intellect. They want to predict. They want to foretell. Without realizing, everything is already in place, already have all things are interconnected. Because we are overly relying on the intellect, we realize we don't have the energy, right? And our individual intellect is so limited. What happened? We invent AI. This is the natural path we have to go through because the path we have taken. Without realizing, the awareness is the mother of all AI. Remember I said, AI only works well where the rule is known. So think about it. Awareness is the AI. The awareness know all the rules, right? So why don't you rely on the master AI within you?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Paul, follow up.
Yeah, love it. That I could take many follow-ups, but I'll really zero in. So do you see it as a path that is very often taken and is a legitimate one because of all these capabilities we have in our proclivities that can lead us down the garden path of the 10,000 things to get to the one through a dissertation on the many, through a presentation of 2, yin and yang, a presentation of 3 the Trinity, for instance, that shows that actually one is each of the other, but it makes the mind go into kind of a, you can't think of that intellectually when someone says the three, each of the three is actually the one, but it kind of makes your brain able to come closer to the one. So it's a valid path to gain awareness. That's my comment / question. Do you agree?
Yes, I do realize that too. Initially, I always, thinking, if we have enough people like Lao Tzu realize, the everything is a math, the miracle is everywhere. Therefore, we should be practicing non-doing. Then we were in a different civilization, different path. But then I realized we human cannot overcome that desire. This the path we have to take before we realize what is the right path. So 3,000 years is short for the humanity. But I do believe one day we had enough lessons, the catastrophic lessons, we will inevitably move to the right path. Otherwise, human as a species will be extincted, I think.
Juan, did you have a comment? And then we'll go to Mark.
Yeah, but I just want to make to be a little bit clownish. That's all. It will take 10 seconds. When PG said that we have a natural AI, I beg to differ a little bit, because if the one is the AI, it's not AI, it's CI, cosmic intelligence, and not artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Juan. Next up is Mark. Mark, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really enjoying this conversation as well. And thank you, Paiji, for bringing in these mythological elements. And just in terms of resonances with other cultures, there was something that you said that really struck me as reminiscent of the ancient Egyptian pyramid texts, which we don't often get to mention. So this is my one and only chance, this whole year. And that was where I think you said body to earth, soul to heaven, something like that. Paiji, am I right?
Yes, that was a mythology, and really reflect my understanding. If you took Tao as the pure consciousness, that is the spirit, it's always there. It will never perish.
In the pyramid texts from the 5th dynasty, you can read this in places like Budge's edition of the pyramid texts from the early 20th century. You read the following: Ba, dear, pet, Shan, dear, ta. Soul to heaven, body to earth. And in this conglomeration of spirits that you've talked about, it is also paralleled in the sense that the Egyptian concept of the soul is so multi-layered. And according to some accounts, there are 9 different parts of the soul. And certain things like the ka is thought of as the unity of the abstract characteristics, which sounds like the personal spirits that you were talking about. And then the sahu is the spiritual body, of course. The ba is the separable part of the ka. And then the kai beat, the shadow, the ku, intelligence, and even a name which is familiar from the ancient Chinese but has a different meaning. Ren is the name. So this multi-layered, multiplicity maybe is another way to think of this conglomeration of the human being. And that's what I was thinking of, was the connection there.
Thank you, Mark. We lost our host. Anyone wish to question?
And I guess, I'll just mention another question about the handout that you showed at the beginning. And this idea of, I'm looking at the handout right now. You said the following reflects an enlightened one from others' perspectives, as the enlightened one perceives no self. And I guess that just struck me as sounding very Buddhist. And I think if Jason were here, he might question how far we want to tread into Buddhism and interpreting the Tao Te Ching.
Can I interrupt here?
Go ahead.
Yes.
The actually the one I quoted is directly from Tao Te Ching. It's been mentioned twice. In verse 16, not of 16, verse 22, the Lao Tzu mentioned, perceiving no self is enlightenment. So enlightened person would not perceive self. It's been mentioned twice in a positive and negative way. In verse, I think it was 43, or not 43, either 24 or maybe 24, 22 and 24. The other verse mentioned about when you see yourself, when you perceive yourself, you are not enlightened. So this is not a Buddhist concept alone. Seeing no self is being mentioned in this book. And as I said, it can be easily understood. Once you realize we are the pure consciousness, which is a universal, which is everywhere. So that self is not really individual self.
Thank you, Peichi. I had a question and a comment. I really liked your description of body, the subconsciousness, and consciousness. And I was looking at the subconsciousness and its features and how it is different from consciousness. Because subconsciousness is passive. It has a lot of things in it, but it's reactive to things. Whereas awareness is active. It is the active element. And the active element produces things in the subconscious, just like it produces 10,000 things outside. It produces 10,000 things inside in the subconscious, including the words. And if you use those words as just given, I love the architect Louis Sullivan. He calls it, form follows function. So the function is awareness, which is actually generating all these forms, 10,000 forms. And the moment you move to forms and say, that's all there is, or whatever forms you're familiar with, or whatever is there in your subconscious, whatever is there in your memory, then you have given up the function. And it's actually going to stop you from exercising your function, unless you kind of go back. Does that jive with what you're saying?
Yes. In fact, yes, in relation to subconsciousness and pure consciousness, subconsciousness uses our memory, uses the data in our memory. And where the data is coming from it coming from our pure consciousness.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is David.
By the way, I just quickly also mention that if you use the metaphor about the human being as a computer, the awareness, the floating spirit, it's like a operating system program. The operating system.
Mm-hmm.
That is the program. That is the AI. That is the master, the mother of all AI. When I say this, is because it contains all the rules. It contains all the data. So the awareness, unlike a subconsciousness, itself have distinct data and analyzer. Analyzer is your intellect. And the data is what you have experienced, have been made aware, that is stored in your memory, right? And beyond this, awareness is self-contained program and the data. It contains everything. It knows everything, right? It's the source of everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Pechi. Next up is David.
Yeah, Shrikant, I want you to put this in your model because I think you have to fit it in somewhere, which is consciousness versus subconsciousness. And I agree, subconsciousness, I think of it, if we're going to use the word, we ought to think of something passive, not the active mind, which I'm not aware of. I'm talking about subconsciousness, like we can go there and find things. We have memory, impressions, prior feeling, sense, all of those things. And also awarenesses in my body that I can turn to. But consciousness, I think, has both a passive and active aspect to it. Because when you open, so you're making the reception, which is sort of passive, right? Consciousness participates in that way. The second thing is that it's active because when you act and will and imagine and choose, you prepare, and that's active. And that's so consciousness has those two sides. It's not, I don't think it's just this passive is subconscious and the active is conscious. I think consciousness itself contains a sphere of activities. That's all.
That's a very good point. I mean, I think the consciousness has, again, going back to Louis Sullivan, he thinks, the function is breathing in and breathing out. You're taking in the world, and that's an active process. You are saying yes. The passive would be if you're just reacting to what is already there in your head without, like, to be truly open to things is an act of tremendous activity. You're simply basically saying yes to the world. Think of it, the best thing, I always think of this in terms of persons. Because like if you want to really listen to a person, okay, you kind of have to, if you want to be aware of the other person, you kind of have to let that other person speak to you, keep whatever you have aside for a moment and give that. And it's an act of a tremendous amount of awareness. And there is activity involved that in just receptive. So it's not, you're not acting. So both those parts of this conscious activity, the reactivity, by reactivity, I mean that you just see the other person, you have a certain kind of impression, and you just, that impression
Right.
that you have, right? The impression that you have is just something that your automatic process produced. And then you're just reacting, you're taking an action based on that. So both processes involve kind of taking in and taking out. But, so breathing in and breathing out. But in case of awareness, it's fresh. You're actually saying, what is it? And you are trying to create something new, which is appropriate for the context. Not just, whereas when you're operating in a completely reactive way, what you take in is actually just what you had already. You're really not taking in, you're just figuring out what it suggests, and then you're acting, but you're acting in a form. Does that make sense to you?
I really like that you described it with the word new, the newness of it, because you don't know what it's about to unfold. So allowing that, and that's nameless, boy, does that sound familiar. Yeah, really being in that for awareness to be new. That's a great word. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Great point.
A quick feedback from me in relation to David's comments. I know it's a big topics, but just quickly, if you take that awareness as a passive, then I would say you are separating the awareness. You didn't. I mean, awareness is really yourself, and when you took that passively, that means you are not with the awareness, and being is about being is really about being the awareness yourself.
It's an interesting distinction in language, that what I'm calling passive, you're actually pointing out how it's affecting you, and that's sort of an active thing. And so it's very interesting. Thanks for that complexity.
Thank you. Folks, I mean, the thing is that this is actually very difficult things to talk about. And most of us are using words which are slightly different, you know? And many times, like what Peji is referring to by intellect, I see it as being kind of subconscious, reactive part. Whereas in some context, when intellect is used, is seen as an active part by some. So it's like, I mean, it's important not to get hung up on these words, because what we're trying to do is that we're trying to get through the words of saying, okay, what is being said about reality, about human experience, about who we are, about what the world is. Thank you. Next up is Kwan.
Okay. I would like to precisely be a little bit picky and come back to the words, okay? Because once again, my obsession is that the intellect cannot go to the ultimate, but the intellect can go to the event horizon. And the event horizon is very close to being. What I mean is that when you use the word, the Chinese word, the po, on the left, you have the radical for pai, which is white, but white also means clear. Okay, it also means clear. So if we accept the division in three of the hexagram, line 1 and 2 meaning earth or Kuei, the personality, and line 2 is the intellect, I would like to suggest that we can call that the subconscious precisely, where the intellect is, and as you said very clearly, Srikan, is the level when we accumulate the past memories and the automatic reaction to this and that as perceived from the environment. Okay, so there's no, we can never say that a human being is completely unconscious, so that's why I use the word subconscious. Okay. And the lines 3 and 4, which correspond to man in the hexagram, where there is more consciousness precisely, that I call individuality of consciousness, and precisely where you have that Chinese word, po, with the radical white or clear, meaning that there is a certain dawning of the clarity of consciousness that I would call consciousness. And the last two lines, heaven 5 and 6, I would suggest to introduce, and I know it might be a little bit clumsy because when we speak about those things, we need to use words. Okay, so it's a proposition. I would call it super consciousness. Okay, so subconscious consciousness as an individual level, and super consciousness with the Chinese word hun, and the radical for hun is cloud. But cloud in classical Chinese, yun, also means to say something, to say. Okay? And here we go back precisely to the idea of logos. Okay, it's from there that you are truly active and dynamic because you are in the say of logos. And here I think that the Chinese radical are absolutely clear, and I gave an interpretation, but I dare say that that interpretation is not a spinning of the imagination, because the radical yun in classical Chinese truly means say, and um, the pai truly means white nowadays, but it also means clarity. And here I know it's once again an intellectual trick, but the consciousness is a consciousness of the self with a small s, okay? Meaning do your things, okay? You do your things at a personal level. And the super consciousness is not the self of do your things. It's the universal self, the self of the logos. Once again, it's intellectual categories, but if it can help, so much better. I stop here.
Thank you, Quan. Great observations. And I certainly, love words, but I think you can love words as long as you know that you're using the words in order to grasp something which is infinite, and then you're actually very eager to give up the words that you're used to using with in order to find better words. So it is this progress towards. So it is a way of actually singing. It's like in Indian tradition, it is called singing to God. You're singing to God. So it's your expressions. It's your expressions you're speaking. Even whatever we are doing here is speaking or
Absolutely.
writing. You're expressing yourself, and you do the best you can, and you keep making it better and better and better, never losing the context that what we're trying to grasp is something which is singular, and it is holistic, and it covers everything.
Yeah.
Right.
The journey to the event horizon. I stopped here.
Very well put. All right, Peji, we are coming to the last 5 minutes. Any concluding remarks? What did you think so far of? I thought this was fantastic. Okay, I'm really grateful. And I'm really impressed with all the questions and comments from everybody. Just great stuff. Any closing remarks?
Thanks for the opportunity to share my thoughts. And I know that Tao Te Ching is very hard to understand, simply because it cannot be understood by our intellect. So something you have to resonate with your awareness. And I stress, you should have a faith that not is based on others, saying, or even the doctrine like Tao Te Ching. You really have to have that resonation. Has to be resonated with your awareness, not the doctrine. And besides, the language itself is naturally dualistic, and it could be missing something. So read it in conjunction with the totality. And I would encourage you to read my translation as a beginner, with the beginner's mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Peji, can you do one more favor? Can you put your translation in the chat for those people who did not get it last time?
I will do, yeah.
Folks, so here is the translation. Peji is about to put it. You can go ahead and read it. The appendix that he referred to, you can go ahead and read it at your at your convenience, because he actually covered a lot of ground there. It is summary of a lot, and folks, thank you so much. No matter how much time I spend on Tao Te Ching by myself, every time I come to this meetup, I learn so much more. Not just Jason and Amon, but Peji and Quan David and Mark and Paul and everybody, you know, Peter, they just add so much to this conversation, because each comes at it, each of us is trying to commune with the Tao in our own way, in an individual way, as Pages was suggesting, and we are actually openly sharing that with one another, and that's the best way of making progress. All right, thank you so much. See you soon.
Thanks, Ricardo. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.